Here's the wind of the pitch. Swung on, belted. Way back. It might be. It could be. It is. Holy cow. It's time for another edition of Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Cub fans! Welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. I'm your host, Jeff Candid Cubs Rogowskis, and I think if you're listening to this, you're probably feeling a little bit down. Yes, it has been a very tough week in Cubdom, losing 3 of 4 to the Brewers and 2 of the abbreviated series for St. Louis. One, a old historic rival, and another budding new rivalry up in the north. Not a fun week for me as a fan, not a fun week for this ball club as they continue to struggle this month offensively, even with excellent pitching. Without the pitching, I'm not sure how many wins that they put together this month. Probably less than they currently have, as they sit at 10-17 in May 2024. The irony is they were 10-18 in May of 2023. So if that gives you a little bit of solace that this has happened before and there is hope of turning the season around, then great. I'm glad I've been able to provide that for you, as I don't believe this team is as bad as they've played of late, losing their last 5 series. But there are definitely still some issues on this roster that need to be addressed, which we will start today with one of them in a new series we're calling Curing the Cubs. But before we get there, as always, we start with the box score blitz, going over the week of games since our last podcast to give you a quick recap of everything going on in the Cubs world, impress your friends with knowing what's going on, and have fun with us going quickly through the scores. So without further ado, let's start some time on the clock, see how fast I can get through the scores this week, as there are only 6 games to talk about. 3, 2, 1... Go. Rain, go away. We're going to play this one someday, actually, in July. That was game 1 this weekend, was rained out with the Cardinals as the Cubs were opening their 3-game set with St. Louis as they wore the Lou jerseys, which is the most famous pizza at Lou Malnati's. Oh, maybe it's the sausage pizza, but hilarious it's on there. It's also a toilet. Anywho, game 2, they get to debut those City Connect toilet jerseys, and the Cub fans rejoice the return of Joe Buck. Not Jameson Taillon is facing Mike Mikolas in this game. Mikolas had been hit pretty hard this year, and it was hopefully the medicine for an ailing offense, but guess what? It wasn't. The Cubs get behind the 8 ball early on a Nolan Arenado 2-run single in the 3rd. But wait, Nico, we go. He smokes a double off the wall that looked like a home run to drive in Mike Tauchman and Christopher Morel, and we are back in business. Bush Bay wins my heart again, drives in the go-ahead run. It's 3-2 Cubs, but Mason Wynn ties it up in the 6th inning, and Wisdom answers immediately to give the Cubs a 4-3 lead on a double, but the wheels come off in the 8th. Say has a pretty poor throw to try to nail down the go-ahead run after Matt Carpenter, aka the ex-Cub killer, once again Cub killer with a single with 2 outs. It's now a 4-4 tie in this game. Donovan scores 2 on the single and Newbar triples. It's now 7-4 Cards. The Cubs put together a rally in the 9th inning to make this thing interesting off Ryan Heisey, but Morel grounds out with a tying run at 3rd. Cubs lose this game 7-6 in a very frustrating fashion. Guess what? Game 3 is not going to be much different. Rain delay again. There was lots of footage of rain just pouring in the dugouts. We had to wait until much later in the evening for this game to start, way after 8 p.m., and the Cubs had an afternoon game coming on Memorial Day, so awesome. Not going to call this one quickly because it's on national TV, so it's probably going to get played. Storms move out of the area, and it's Assman versus Sonny Gray, and Gray was pretty sharp. He only threw 5 good pitch count and had 8 Ks. Assman also had 8 Ks, but he gave up 2 bombs, both 2-run shots to Paul Goldschmidt, which put the Cubs bat down early. Smiley and Hodge did their job. They shut down the Cardinals for the final 3 innings in this game. Guess what? Half Daddy, known by MLB The Show players everywhere, hit 2 bombs in this game, hopefully coming out of his little bit of slump. Had 3 RBIs as well. He won those home runs in the 9th inning to make the game interesting. Let's put some runners on, but again, 0 for 6 runners in scoring position. They lose this game 4-3, get swept in the abbreviated 2-game series. So hopefully the Brew Crew is going to help things out. Maybe we're going to play against Brewers because we're trying to chase first place. Happy Memorial Day to all our vets in game 1. The Bluebirds aplenty, as there is a very short tribute video to Craig Counsell and his return to Milwaukee. This one is Robert Gasser versus Justin Steele. And guess what? Justin Steele was the man of steel. No kryptonite today. He shoved 7 innings pitched, 3 hits, 1 walk, 8 Ks, 13 whips. But guess what? Robert Gasser was just as good. 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, 7 Ks with 12 whips. Lights out today? Nope, more like light up. 5 runs in the 8th inning, including a 3-run bomb by Willie Adames, who became a thorn in the Cubs' side in the series. They lose the game 5-1 after the 5 runs late in this game. Very frustrating. Not much offense once again. Game 2. Mr. Brown versus Freddie Peralta, their top pitcher, and holy Brown, what can Brown do for you? He can shove 7 no-hit innings, 2 walks, 10 Ks, 16 whiffs. They get a run off Freddie Freeman earlier in this game with My Bush Bay hitting a bomb. Guess what? They're still registered at Marshall Fields, and he had a 108.7 mile per hour home run at 411 feet. But guess what? I grab all the Tums I have in my house as Hector Neris comes in to hold this short lead. The Brew Crew tie it on a flare single by guess who? Willie Adames in the 9th inning. Extra innings comes, extra runs for the Cubs. They put up a 5 spot in the 10th. Are the bats back? No easy wins though. Luke Little and Miller tighten this thing out and they tightrope out. Cubs win 6-3, a much needed win. So, well, heading into game 3, we have Showtime. But guess what? This premium channel is pretty expensive and today it was canceled. The Brew Crew finally got to the front runner for the Rookie of the Year. Shota was on extra rest because of rain out, and he did not look very sharp. Only 4.1 innings, only 1 K, 2 home runs, one of them to Blake Perkins. And guess what? Blake Perkins was the story of this game. He giveth and he taketh away. He hit a home run, and he stole many, many extra base hits in this game from the Cubs. He robbed a home run, had several web gems. Cubs were 0 for 8 with runners in scoring position. This one got out of hand. Cubs scored some runs later in the game. They lose 10-6. Kyle Hendricks was deployed out of the pen, the cleanest thing up after Shota. He gave up a home run to Willie Adames. Yes, Willie Adames, the 4-0 side. So will the Cubs split this series in Game 4 today? It was Jameson Taillon versus Colin Ray. Taillon gave a valiant effort of 6 innings pitched, 6 hits, 1 walk, 4 Ks. Cubs score first on a Bellinger home run and have a pretty solid 23 wins this year when they score first. Brewers answer with some hits that lead to 3 runs in the second. Yes, some dinks, some doinks, and some hard hits in there is now 3-1 Brewers. Cubs pinch hit late in the game with Seiya, and guess what? He hits a tying 2-run home run. So this feels like a game that's in reach. But however, since this isn't fun, Bryce Trang hits a little nubber back to the mound. Mark Laird Jr. was on the mound, and Blake Perkins scores, who ended up on third after stealing a base and also a wild pitch. This is kind of the story of the game. There's some poor catching going on, but morale support incoming. He had an opposite field hit earlier in the game that looked pretty hard, and guess what? An opposite field home run. Apo Taco, not even on a Tuesday, and we're all knotted up, but Luke Little brought little support. 3 base runners through some walks, but he gets a big double play. More issues blocking behind the plate. Scary Gary Sanchez hits a hanging slider that's on the outside of the zone as he seemed to be sitting slider from Tyson Miller. It is now 6-4. Cubs lose 3 of 4, lose the game 6-4, are now a game below 500. And that is your box score blitz. So yeah, not a lot of positivity in the box score blitz today. And there was some tough games in there. I'm not sure, especially, that game today, that the Cubs necessarily looked bad. The bats looked a little bit better. There was some slug finally. This series was a story of continuous, just horrible luck for this offense as they're hitting balls all over the field that have extremely high expected batting averages based on launch angle and position and all those things that calculate that stat. And there's an extremely good article written over at Bleacher Nation about the Cubs just league leading bad luck, which I think when things are going poorly, especially when it feels like the wheels are coming off the car, and now that the team is under 500, they have survived a tough stretch with a large number of injuries. And now some of these guys are getting healthy. And I think there are some challenging roster decisions ahead as they address a bench that isn't doing much for them, as they address some other issues that we'll get into starting this week. But there is hope as we move forward. And we'll do a quick standings update on where the team is. Obviously, you know that the Cubs are now a game under 500 based on what I had just said. And also, the Cardinals slide into second place. They ran off some wins and also got some of those versus us. They're at 500 at 27-27 in second place. The Brew Crew are now 10 games above 500, the plus 52 run differential, the only positive run differential in the NL Central. Cubs are at 28-29, and minus 10 run differential, having given up the most runs in the NL Central. The Pittsburgh Pirates come in right behind them, 26-30, and the Cincinnati Reds are 24-32. Their expected win-loss is 27-29. They've played a ton of one-run games. It's been a challenge for them. They have not scored a ton of runs offensively. So, Cubs are still one game back of a wild card spot, as there's a lot of teams. If you look at the NL West, they're in that one game above, one game under area in the wild card standings. So the Cubs aren't out of playoff contention, and I don't want to be talking about wild card at this point. And there is so much time and so many games left versus the Brewers that the division isn't gone. It isn't something that has disappeared, but this was a very frustrating series. Now, I think there's been a lot of conversation. There's been conversation on this podcast. There's been some analysis by Bleacher Nation and other sources about the Cubs schedule. And this was a tougher section of the Cubs schedule, and they did not go into it super healthy. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses for this group, but they are much more talented than how they've been playing of late. They hit .216 batting average as a team in May so far. Yeah, it's just not going to cut it. And it doesn't matter how good your pitching is. It's very frustrating. Cliff Floyd said after the game today on Marquee Network that it feels like there's always something. There's always something going wrong. If it's not the offense doing their thing, it's the starter might have had a bad game. And the starters should be allowed to have bad games. They've had an incredible run. And if it's not them, it's the bullpen. If it's not them, it's the offense. And they're just not putting it all together yet. And over at Northside Baseball, there's an article about maybe we were a little too hard on David Ross. Maybe he wasn't the problem. And it might be a little too early for some of those conversations. It's hard to tell what the Craig Counsell effect is at this point. We've seen Brewer teams start this way as well and get really, really hot as things get locked in and guys get locked into positions. There's a lot of wins this team has left on the table by not having an effective bullpen. And that is something that is becoming more glaringly frustrating as the Cubs have been in this stretch of mediocre offensive ball, which also kind of points to the lack of a star and not being able to raise the rest of this group up. So the Cubs were the third worst offensive team in May. There's one more game to go tomorrow in May versus the Reds, but unless they put up 20 runs, I don't think it's going to holistically change the data of the other games this month. But the good news for the Cubs is the two teams that were worse than them offensively this month, they're playing in their next two series at home at Wrigley. They're seeing the Reds and they're seeing the White Sox. I think I will boldly say on this podcast right now that there should not be a loss to the White Sox. There should not be. They are playing just absolutely terrible ball. They are a terrible baseball team. They do not have many of their players that do produce are not healthy. Their pitching staff has been atrocious. It would be very frustrating to lose White Sox games at Wrigley Field. So that I'm putting that out into the baseball universe right now, that is something that I just don't think should happen. And I'm hoping the Cubs take advantage of that opportunity to rack some wins at Wrigley. The Reds have been scuffling as well offensively, and their pitching has not been as sharp as the Cubs' pitching has been. So there is an opportunity. There is also a chance that we're going to see a few games this weekend that are just painful to watch offensively. And the difference could be the Reds are a very athletic and fast team. Elly De La Cruz steals bases left and right, and if you're going to give him free spots on base or not convert outs or commit errors and let him get on base, as we've seen with the Brewers, they can run all day on this Cubs catching core, and that is going to potentially create runs that just don't need the score. So here's to hoping that things get a little bit better for the Cubs. June is way easier. On the docket, they have the Reds twice, they have another kind of weird schedule this month in which they play the Reds twice and they play the Giants twice. And they also have the Rays, the Cardinals, and the Sox, and the Brew Crew. So the Rays are, a little bit under 500 right now. Not blowing anyone's doors off. They're not a terrible team. They're just in a tough AL East. So it feels like they're further out of it than their record indicates just because of how good the AL East has been at the top. The Giants, they are at 500 and behind the Dodgers in that NL West. So a team that you really do need to beat if you're looking at wild card opportunities and kind of getting the ship back on track. I don't know if the Cardinals are currently overachieving or if some of their pitchers are normalizing. They're getting a little bit more offense of late, and that pitching staff has done enough to keep them in ball games. So it'll be interesting to see them at Wrigley and how that transpires. And the month ends with another shot at the Brew Crew, in which the Cubs are hopefully clicking at this point and also are at full health. So here's to June. As we turn the calendar, let's hope the Cubs get back to a month that's over 500 and stay above 500. So we're having funner conversations in June and July when it comes to supplementing this team through the trade deadline. And without further ado, we do have some thoughts on the starting pitching. Some deep thoughts. Another Deep Thoughts with Mr. Harry Caray, brought to you by Wrigley Fire Bar and Grill.
Holy cow! Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Deep Thoughts with me, Harry. Hope all you Cub fans are doing good out there. Let's start us off by a little, boy, oh boy, that's good. You might be wondering why I'm wearing this shirt from the boys across the street over at 78's house. Well, that's because the topic of today is how much on fire the starting rotation is. It's a play on words. Anyway, you look at our rotation right now, and they're the ones that's keeping us in a lot of these ball games. I mean, let's be honest. The offense right now is so quiet, boy, you hear crickets. Maybe even the cicada are louder than our offense right now. But look at us rotation. I had the boys bring up some stats again, because I'm totally inebriated. Anyway, 1 to 5. First, you got Shoda Imanaga. Spelled backwards as Aganami. Boy, oh boy. This kid is lights out. Sure, he got roughed up the other night and came back to reality in Milwaukee. But he's still pitching lights out. Despite that, he's 5-1 with a 186 ERA and a whip of 1 in 10 games. This guy's got 59 strikeouts in 58 innings pitched. Boy, talk about reliable. And then we march right on down the line to Jameson Taillon. Within 8 games, he's 3-2 with a 2.52 ERA. Whip a 127 with 26 strikeouts. Javier Assad! Boy, oh boy, this kid's unbelievable. Virgin on the scene with 11 games and a 2.17 ERA and a whip of 1.16. Now, the only question that leaves me to have some more of that is Justin Steele. Boy, that guy, he's starting to come around a little bit. Got me a little nervous with the hibbity-jibbity when he came back from that injury. But he had a great outing the other night in Milwaukee with 7 innings pitched of 8 strikeouts and no runs. Brought his stats down to a 4.45 ERA and a whip of over 1.05. So let's, good Lord willing, we're going to see a good thing out of Justin. But we're like, hey, what are we going to do with the 5th? I got the professor hanging out in the bullpen, doing the dancy with those guys down there. So who do we call on? Oh, it's the young kid, Ben Brown. And let me tell you, what an outing he had the other night in Milwaukee. Had a no going through 7, no runs, no hit. 10 strikeouts on the year. This guy's unbelievable. We started him in the pen. Now he's coming in the rotation. And who knows, he might be here to stay. So this rotation, if this keeps it up, then we find out what's going on in the bullpen. And somebody takes a bat or an alarm clock to the offense and wakes them up, maybe shoo the cicada, the Cubs are going to be all right. So for all of us here at the old Wrigley Fire Bar and Grill, this is Harry Caray saying so long, everybody. Holy cow!
You know, it's always a treat to have Harry on the pod, and I'm glad he brought to attention the Cub fans how great the starting pitching has been, as we alluded to earlier in the podcast. They really have been solid, and they deserve a lot of praise in keeping Cubs games much more interesting of late. Hopefully the offense can reward them with some support so they don't need to feel like they need to be as perfect as they feel like they have been. And speaking of things that are perfect, Wrigleyville Sports. Wrigleyville Sports has been a sponsor of Bricks Behind the Ivy for a while now, and we just appreciate everything that they've done in support of this podcast. If you are looking for any Cubs stuff on Cubs game day, or something caught your eye on TV and you want to get it right away and hop online and shop, Wrigleyville Sports has got you covered. They also don't just have Cubs stuff, they have Sox stuff and all the other Chicago sports teams that you desire to have memorabilia for. They're going to have it. They're the best. Their website is awesome. They have stock right away. They have all the jerseys you're looking for, all the players. I shop there quite regularly, especially if I'm going to be in Wrigleyville. I'm absolutely stopping by there on my way back to the Red Line. So if you want to help support Bricks Behind the Ivy, and you want to help support a small business, a small family-run business like Wrigleyville Sports, here's what you do. There's a link in the description of this podcast, both on YouTube and wherever you're listening to your podcast. Click on that, shop your little heart out, and at checkout, use the code BRICKS10, and you'll get 10% off your order. Not only will you be supporting this podcast by doing that, but you'll be supporting a small family business in Chicago, one adjacent to Wrigleyville Sports. So thank you guys for continuing to be a sponsor of this podcast. So today I wanted to do a new segment, which we will be doing a number of in the coming weeks as time allows and as we have less pressing things to talk about. I kind of wanted to look at how the Cubs can address certain issues on this roster if they're going to supplement at the trade deadline and be a playoff team. And one thing that really stuck out in this series versus the Brewers was managing the run game and the catching position. So our first edition of Curing the Cubs is here. So we're looking at different positions across the team that need to be addressed if the Cubs are going to make the playoffs in 2024. And catcher is really where I want to start. Yeah, Miguel Amaya definitely looked tough in today's game, blocking some pitches, blocking some splitters. I am concerned that in later stages of this game, when Tyson Miller came in, his sliders were up and not as far off the plate. I wonder if there was concern of his ability to block because of some of the balls that got past him in the innings in this game, which led to the opportunity of Gary Sanchez, who can be a free swinger, to sit on a slider and did not roll off the plate as much as they wanted, and he hit a go-ahead 2-run homer that was smoked. It's like he knew it was coming, and it just caught too much to the plate. That thing should be buried on a guy like Gary, and we might be having a different conversation. But the Cubs catching core right now just does not rate out well offensively or defensively. They're currently 27th in baseball. Yeah, it's out of 30. So when you turn the list upside down, it looks better. But if you're holding it the right way, it's not good. So Major League average for caught stealing percentage this year is 31%, which is, pretty low. I would assume that, the bigger bases and the run game has become a bigger part of the game. And there are a lot of teams that are kind of running rampant. You look at the Reds, the Brewers like to push the envelope. They have a lot of speed with, Perkins and Bryce Trang, Sal Frelick, and a few others that are able to steal bases. So when they get on, they push the issue. And the average catching pop time is 1.99 seconds, which is basically the amount of time it takes for them to get the ball from their glove and start their throw. So where do Miguel Amaya and Yan Gomes rank in those? Well, not great. Their caught stealing percentage Miguel Amaya, who's played a bulk of the games this year, is 1 out of 24 in throwing out runners, which is 13%. Yan Gomes is 1 out of 7, which is 29%. So, I mean, semantics here, I guess, when you're talking about the two of them. Not a lot of opportunities for Gomes and a decent amount of opportunities in Amaya, and you wonder if that's only going to increase as we see teams like the Reds and the Brewers. And that's going to become more of an issue. Neither one of these guys rates very well on a framing perspective, so they're not stealing a ton of strikes for this pitching staff. Yan Gomes has been known to manage pitchers and call a good game behind the plate. And Brendan Miller over at CHGO had pointed out the large volume of fastballs called by Miguel Amaya in games. And I guess it would surprise me if he was doing that on his own will in 2024 when there's so many individuals involved in the game plan. But if he is back there calling a game plan, is he hesitant to call some of these breaking pitches because of some of the blocking issues? So beyond defense, offensively, both Cubs catchers have been truly, truly awful as well. It has become a black hole in this lineup, which is, very, very frustrating. They're not, they don't look good as a team. They don't look good as a unit. And defensively and offensively, they are causing a lot of issues for the Cubs. So this is something that I feel that the Cubs definitely need to address at the trade deadline. So what is the thought process in looking at this team and looking at players that might, fit the bill for what they're looking for? So the Cubs need probably some offensive production. I think that's a bonus in some cases. If you really want to focus on defense, if you want to control the run game, which could be very important down the stretch in the NL Central, especially versus a team like the Brewers, who have taken the lead in this division by 5.5 games, you're going to have to figure out a way to neutralize them. That's your primary target in entering the playoffs, and there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be stealing and pushing that envelope. So managing the run game could be very, very important. So where do we go? What teams are we shopping rosters for? Well, as of today, which is May 30th, I was looking at teams that are currently in last place or theoretically out of playoff races. Some of these things can change if some of these teams go on the runs, like on different runs. But the Rockies, the Reds, the Marlins, Mets, Angels, Athletics, White Sox are all, significantly below 500. The Reds probably being one of the better of that group, with the Astros right there as well. The Jays, the Blue Jays, which is, I know a lot of Cub Twitter folks are talking about them as a trade target for a lot of different reasons. There are some bats on that lineup that people are excited about, and there's a catcher that people are taking their eye on as well, who's pretty good offensively and defensively. But the Jays are kind of like the Rays. They're around 500 just in a tough AL East. So I think it's going to take a little bit more time before they really enter that. Maybe they're moving some pieces, maybe making some tough decisions. So I've left the Rays and the Jays off this list for now. So I went and looked at Fangraphs and Baseball Savant and looked at some offensive data and some defensive data and found some targets really focusing first on defense. And I found 5 names of players that reasonably could be in the Cubs target list, and then eliminated 2 of these names based on kind of their overall numbers not being enough or good enough to really address the problem, but they were interesting in which they had very, very low, acquisition costs, or they did something on the defensive side that was above average that stuck out. So we'll start with the 2 names I eliminated, Christian Bethancourt and Tomas Nido. Bethancourt is on the Marlins currently, and Tomas Nido is on the Mets. Both these catchers are in their 30s, Bethancourt being 32, Tomas Nido is 30, and they're okay. There's 2 years of control on Bethancourt. He's not an unrestricted free agent until 2026. His pop time and his caught stealing have been above average the last 3 seasons, but he's not much of a framer. his bat is pretty bad, and he's not good at blocking pitches either. So, yeah, you're getting some good arm action, some good support in the run game by having a strong arm and having a good pop time. But you're losing some other things, and if he's not going to help you offensively, that's just not enough. The cost would probably be pretty low given his age, even though there's some control there. He's not a young guy. Marlins are probably looking to move stuff off that roster. Not a very solid roster. Looking for answers down there in Miami. A lot of their star pitchers are injured this year. So that seemed like a good opportunity, but Bethancourt just isn't enough to help this Cubs team. Tomas Nido, similar situation. His bat is fine. It's not screaming anything super exciting at me. Metrics are projecting at the moment in a smaller sample size that his barrel percentage and his hard hit rate is pretty good, which is something you'd want to see, but he's only at 73 at bats. There's not enough data there. And historically, he just has not been a good hitter, sub 700 OPS significantly. But he is above average defensively. So he is a great framer, a very good pitch blocker, and his caught stealing percentage and his pop time are both above the major league average. So he's in the last year of his 2-year deal. He signed a $3.7 million deal with 1.7 being last year and $2 million this year. So he's a fringe player. He can address things defensively for the Cubs. I'm not sure if the Mets are picking up the phone. I feel like they got swindled in the PCA trade, but I mean, they're the ones who paid the price. I think they were concerned about that arm health, I guess, at the time, and really wanted Javier Baez to solidify the middle infield. And I mean, it worked out for them that they didn't sign him to an extension. He has not been anything to write home about in Detroit, which has been tough to watch as a Cub fan who really enjoyed watching him play defense for the number of years that he was here. So that leaves us to 3 solid targets, and I'm going to start in a reverse ranking of who I want to see on this Cubs roster to address the catching situation. The first one is a old friend, Mr. Victor Caratini, who, thanks to Bleacher Nation, I will always think of as a carrot martini when he is up the bat. Switch hitting catcher, still, relatively young. He's a solid framer, but he hasn't had a ton of run in Houston this year. He's grading out as a pretty good framer and getting some strike calls that he shouldn't based on where he's setting up position-wise. And he seemed to kind of catch on in the framing once he went to Milwaukee. Milwaukee's done a good job of, addressing some of the defensive nuances of catchers. So he's a solid defender. He obviously is familiar with the Cubs, has caught stealing, he's got a good arm, he's good at catching runners, has been above average last 2 seasons, and he is pretty cheap. He signed a 2-year deal in 2024, only $6 million a year, so not a ton of cost there. So the Cubs would get him for not only this year but next year. So Caratini seems like a solid target, switch hitter. He's always been a pretty sneaky good hitter. Cubs have so little offense being generated from the catcher position that any offensive upgrade is an upgrade. So I'm not excited about a Victor Caratini bat, but the bat is pretty solid, and he has been known to hit some home runs. He seems like a solid all-around player, and I think the acquisition cost from the Astros would be pretty low. They have Yanier Diaz. That is kind of their main guy over there, so he's just a backup. This could be, I guess, like a Yan Gomes replacement. I don't think the Cubs are going to bail on Miguel Amaya. He's out of options, so they're not going to cut Amaya. They're going to want him to be a part of this future for the team. So Caratini seems like a solid option. Number 2 on my list is another older catcher who's currently on the Rockies, Elias Diaz. He's got great framing. His caught stealing is above average, near the top of the list on Baseball Savant. And his pop time is really, really good, especially for a 33-year-old catcher. He's on the last year of his deal. He's getting $6 million this year, so prorated at that point. The Cubs could take on the salary if they're interested in doing so, and they don't need to commit to him for the rest of the year. So this would be a pretty low-cost acquisition, given the age and given the contract and the lack of control. And that kind of leads me to think this is a move they could make with very little prospects and something they can do as kind of an ancillary move to a bigger move. So I do like the idea of going after him because of the low acquisition cost potential. He has a pretty high chase and whiff rate, but his batting average and his on-base percentage are pretty solid currently, which is weird, but he does play at Coors, so there could be some bat pip noise, but the on-base percentage when he doesn't seem to have a high walk rate is kind of confusing. He's currently hitting .299 with a .343 on-base percentage and .431 slugging, so he's got some pop in that bat. He's an all-star in 2023. He's been around 700, 600, high 600s, low 700s OPS. So obviously, that's what we got from Jan Gomes last year. He's an older catcher, so maybe he tires as the season goes on, but a solid target to address the Cubs' needs, especially on the defensive side and having the upside of some offense. So my dream target, and I think it's going to be obviously the most challenging to acquire given the number of years of control, is Shane Langoliers over in Oakland, or Bangoliers as they call him, as he hits just mammoth home runs. He's got a ton of power, really young guy, still only 26 years old. He has team control through 2029. So because of that control, I could see the Athletics not being super interested in trading this guy, but the Athletics are weird. And they have given away players for very little in the past, looking at Sean Murphy, Matt Olson, and others. So it doesn't feel like it's a stretch that he could be available. But yeah, it's not certain. But this is like a pie in the sky move at the moment. Given the number of years of control, I'm guessing the price tag could be pretty high. But I'm not positive. He's a catcher. I don't know how they value Shane and Shea in his current position and his current numbers. So batting average, not great. On base percentage, not great. Guy strikes out a lot. He swings and misses a lot. But the bat speed, 75th percentile, looks pretty solid. His power, his barrel rate, all that is excellent. He's in the 75th percentile or better in all those stats, which is why his slugging percentage is near 500, even with a 280 on base. So he's a 780, 760 to 780 OPS guy from the catching position. And when he is hitting the ball, he's hitting it very, very hard. Defensively, he's pretty solid too. His caught stealing is in the 75th percentile. He does gun down runners. He's got a very strong arm back there. And his pop time's at 1.9, which is way better than average. And yeah, his blocking isn't amazing and his framing is mid-pack, but you're getting huge offensive upside and solid defense. And he's also fast. He's got good sprint speed. He's in the 75th percentile for sprint speed. So he's a better base runner. And that's huge from a catcher, thinking like JT Real Muto. Not comparing him to him, but thinking of catchers that can run well. He's a solid framer or mid-tier framer. Has a really good arm, throws guys out so that can control the running game, and he adds some slug to this lineup from a position they're getting nothing out of. But yeah, the cost is going to be extremely high. That is my worry, is the cost to get Shea. So those are the three guys. And once again, Caratini, Elias Diaz, and then the pie in the sky, Shea Langoliers. Do you guys have any thoughts on catchers the Cubs should go after? I know that if I do look at this doc, there's going to be a lot about a specific Jays catcher that people want to go after. But yeah, I really want to see the Jays start losing some games, no offense to Jays fans, so that we can have a better commitment on what their moves are going to be as we approach the trade deadline. Because there are not just catchers on that roster that I'm interested in the Cubs. There are some sluggers on that lineup that I think it might be time to pull the trigger using the farm system that Jet has built to acquire a young bopper to hopefully extend this lineup, because that just isn't something that can happen a lot. But yeah, let me know in the comments on YouTube if you can think of another catcher that the Cubs should check out. Would love to hear from you. And that leads me to a perfect transition of our brand new YouTube subscription contest. Yes, we are having a contest here at Bricks Behind the Ivy, and it's super simple to enter. And there's two ways to do it. Number one, go to YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and then put a comment on this episode, episode 18, and put the hashtag Brickhead in your comment. And that enters you into the contest. The other way to do it is to share the link of the YouTube video on Twitter using hashtag Brickhead and tagging the Bricks Behind the Ivy Twitter account. That will be 2 separate entries. Now, what are the prizes and how do we win them? Well, I'm glad you asked. The way to win these prizes is to subscribe, and once we get to 50 subscribers, I will give away 3 Bricks Behind the Ivy merchandise items of the individual winner's choice. So it could be a shirt, it could be a blanket, could be our polo shirt, could be our zip up, could be the hot selling tank top that we have that says Bleacher Brickhead on the back. Those have been selling so far pretty well. So any one of your choice. That's the first prize. Now, if we get to 100 subscribers, 100 subscribers, then there'll be a prize pack of a t-shirt, a phone case, and a notepad, and a pair of my Cubs tickets for one lucky winner. So that'll be 2 tickets in section 330R for you, along with the Bricks Behind the Ivy prize pack. And that's if we get to 100 subscribers. So winners will be chosen at the 50 mark, 3 winners at 50, and other winners will be chosen once we reach 100. So share the video, tell your friends to subscribe, comment on the video with hashtag Brickhead, and you'll be entered to win some pretty cool BBTI stuff. Well, that's all the time we have here this week on Bricks Behind the Ivy. Hopefully by the time we talk next week, we will be talking about a nice little win streak and some home cooking as the boys face the Reds and the White Sox, who are also both struggling offensively just as the Cubs are, one with a little worse pitching than the other. So until next time, see you next week, Brickheads. Go Cubs.
Well, that's going to do it from here, from Bricks Behind the Ivy. This is Harry Caray. We know you've enjoyed the broadcast and the outcome. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe to this wonderful broadcast that they've done and the podcast going forward. Be sure to also check us out on YouTube and Instagram and, whatever else is out there on the airwaves. You know, I also love to always say that Jeff's last name spelled backwards is Sick-as-Sugar. And Sean's is Nipak. Bye, oh bye, it never gets old. Well, that's going to do it from here. So from all of us here at Bricks Behind the Ivy, this is Harry Caray saying, go Cubs, holy cow, and so long, everybody.